There is one constant in the world of sports: disagreement. Arguments come up on every single strategy, controversy, and rivalry in every single one. And that is part of what makes sports so entertaining. Even if your team is losing, or there are no games on, or the sanctioning body has undermined the integrity of the league, there is always room for discussion about any number of things. While the exact topics of conversation vary tremendously from sport to sport, there is a single one which manifests in every league and every variant. Who is the greatest? In some places, it is fairly agreed upon who the greatest of all time is. Tom Brady, Usain Bolt, Tiger Woods, and Don Bradman are the first few that come to mind. In most other sports though, there is a substantial amount of dogmatic discourse which dominates their GOAT discussions. Jordan or LeBron, Messi or Ronaldo, Djokovic or Federer, Jones or GSP, Roof, Bonds or Mays. The list goes on. Most of the time though, these debates are often narrowed down to at most 2 or 3 legitimately accepted competitors. The key word there is most. The GOAT of NASCAR is arguably the most contentious issue in the sport of stock car racing, and that is all due to how much has changed over the years. Jerry West and Luka Doncic, despite having more than a half century between them, played on the same court with the same size ball and the same sized hoop. Joe Burrow and Bart Starr had the same football field and had the same positions around them. Muhammad Ali and Tyson Fury fought in the same sized ring with fairly similar techniques. The same cannot be said for stock car racing. NASCAR has been around for 77 years and had 7 generations of car, been contested under more than 10 championship points formats, and gone from racing 50 times a year on beaches and dirt tracks to running on city-sized super speedways and street courses. There is basically nothing alike between the origins of the sport and the product we see every Sunday today, other than that the drivers still turn left. To make the messy timeline of NASCAR easier to keep track of, I think it best to divide the 77-year history into 4 distinct eras. First came the Pioneer Era, when true stock cars first began racing under a unified banner, though with a lot of kinks still needing to be ironed out. Then, in 1972 to 1993, came the standardization and modernization that still persists to this day. A more national schedule with fewer races and an easy-to-follow points format became mainstays of the sport for years to come. From 1994, NASCAR's boom truly began. The sport reached its biggest heights ever thanks to more and more superstars captivating audiences. Then, in 2008, is where many think NASCAR became more entertainment than sport. New cars, points formats, and gimmicks began to dominate stock car racing's era of decline. It became apparent that the sanctioning body was more invested in attempting to stop hemorrhaging ratings through an appeal to entertainment rather than sporting legitimacy. Every one of these eras has its own diehard fans, and as a result, GOAT candidates. However, because of the constant change the sport has seen, it is next to impossible to find 2 identical opinions on the NASCAR GOAT debate. So, I'm going to do my best to present the argument for the 10 drivers in NASCAR history who I think have a legitimate case to be the greatest ever. And from there, hopefully you can make an educated decision. But, before we get into it, let's go through my methodology. The 10 drivers that I have chosen are, I think, the best at least one category. As a result, some otherwise seemingly deserving of mention drivers will be excluded. This is for good reason. If you're not the best at any one thing, how can you realistically be the best of every one? This naturally means that some of the all-time great drivers will miss out on being included. Let's go through some honourable mentions and look into why they were excluded from the top 10. For one, any driver with no championships is automatically excluded from this discussion. That means no Junior Johnson, no Mark Martin, and no Denny Hamlin. These are all legends of the sport, and had some luck gone their way in a given race in a given year, and they had a cup title, it is fully possible that they would be in the top 10. It is just difficult for me to reconcile how somebody who never stood atop the sport for a year could claim to do so for all of time. Secondly, I'd like to honour those drivers who raced exclusively in NASCAR's pioneer era. Greats like Lee Petty and Herb Thomas, while all-time talents and trendsetters in their time, never had the opportunity to demonstrate their skill against a wider field of competitive cars. While there are some GOAT candidates from the pioneer era, these drivers also raced in NASCAR's modern era, and still showed an ability to be great. Lastly, I want to mention Tony Stewart and Joey Logano. Both of them were arguably the best at a particular aspect of racing during their time. Tony with versatility and personality, and Joey with how he was able to dominate and, for a lack of a better term, figure out a points format. The trouble is that while these two three-time champions were undeniably masters at these aspects, there are just drivers who are better at these things than they were. Smoke and sliced bread are definitely up there in the all-time rankings, but I don't see them having a legitimate case for the best ever. And with all that said, let's dive into each driver and each mindset on what makes a GOAT. As we go through the candidates, I'd encourage you to consider which reasoning resonates most with you, and resultantly, who you think is truly the greatest driver in NASCAR history.
Takes the checkered flag.
Richard Petty is heading for the checkered flag.
Petty is out in front at the line. Petty wins it.
Richard Petty holds him off, and Richard Petty picks up the victory. Richard Petty has won the Daytona 500.
And the STP Dodge of Richard Petty has won the Daytona 500.
Richard Petty's nickname is The King. That tells you basically all you need to know. First beginning his NASCAR career at just 20 years old, he would go on to dominate the next 2 decades of the sport, setting milestones that will likely never be neared, let alone toppled. I won't bore you with the raw numbers, since oftentimes I feel like they begin to sound like word salad, but all you need to know is that any stat that one can be the best at, it is a sure bet that The King sits atop its ranking. I think the best way to illustrate this is by comparing Petty's marks to whichever driver is second in each stat. Nobody is even close. If extraordinary numbers and records are what you look for in a GOAT, then Petty is undeniably the pick for you. He is maybe the most statistically dominant athlete in history. Imagine if Bill Russell had all of his current stats, but also held the single game and all-time scoring records, and won 7 MVPs to go along with his 11 championships. That is unfathomable. And while you can't make one-to-one comparisons between motor racing and stick and ball sports, Petty's numbers are as outlandish as they sound. Perhaps the most amazing thing about his numbers is not just how much they exceed the cohort of NASCAR drivers, but how they topple even his fellow GOAT contenders. Petty is top 3 in all but one of our key all-time metrics, and he is only that low because for the first decade plus of his career, one of the crown jewel races didn't even exist yet. Petty's numbers have the ability to make even his contemporaries look minuscule. Much can be said about how Petty's era is the cause of his dominance, and admittedly, there is some credence to this. Take 1967, when Petty set his records for most wins in a season and most consecutive wins. That year, there were 49 races, and in many of those, Petty was the only competitive car, lapping the field multiple times. This is basically the reason why Petty is not oftentimes considered the runaway GOAT. That being said, you race who is in front of you, and it isn't Petty's fault that the schedule was bloated, or that full time had a different meaning back in the pioneer era. Better yet, Petty's dominance wasn't purely limited to that era of the sport. The King won 4 more championships and a ton more races in the modernization era, where the competition drastically improved. If you took Petty's numbers from just 1972 onwards, he would be 10th on the all-time wins list and tied for 3rd in championships. that is fairly sound evidence that Petty would be the greatest ever, regardless of era. One of the most astonishing parts of Petty's GOAT case is how much his godly numbers overshadow everything else. Petty's 43 is arguably the most famous race car in history, and its legacy, while nowhere near its past heights, still lives on in stock car racing today. He is still an intrinsic part of the NASCAR community, and has been instrumental in the ownership scene for decades. Petty was responsible for much of NASCAR's popularity in its early days, and there is a 0% chance that the sport would be where it is today without him. The guy was even given a Presidential Medal of Freedom. Hell, he's in cars for God's sakes. Petty's combination of dominance, legacy, and sheer statistical greatness is unparalleled in the NASCAR world, and there is a reason why he is the de facto pick for GOAT amongst those who saw him race live. You don't get to be called the king for nothing. Funnily enough though, the king, despite having the best numbers ever, took a surprising stance on the GOAT debate. When asked who he thought was the greatest of all time, Petty, without hesitation, gave credit to his biggest rival.
David Pearson is down to the inside. A superlative performance by the Silver Fox. David Pearson's done it.
There's the checker for David Pearson.
David Pearson is the winner.
And Pearson slingshot him as he comes down low. Petty may run him into the fence, and it's going to be Pearson winning it.
And the checkered flag for David Pearson.
Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Pearson is still running. David Pearson moving down through as they come to the stripe. The winner is car number 21.
The Silver Fox is the greatest what-if in NASCAR's illustrious history. Why? Because he ran a full-time schedule just 4 times in his career. His finishes in those 4 seasons? 3rd, 1st, 1st, and 1st. Pearson was the main foe of the King's reign over stock car racing, and without the efforts of the Silver Fox, it's likely that his rival would have double-digit championships. It wasn't even that Pearson would edge out Petty, or that it took catastrophic blunders for him to back into his 3 championships. Pearson completely destroyed Petty in his 3 championship seasons. Each of the years, he had at least a 300-point advantage over the King at year's end. Oh, and remember Richard Petty's 1967 season, when he had 27 wins, including 10 straight? You might wonder where Pearson was that year. Well, that was the season which was the meat in the sandwich between his 3 legendary championship campaigns. He only entered 22 of the 49 races that year, eliminating any hope that he could even be close to Petty. It's almost as if Petty saw Pearson's absence and decided that he had to take advantage of it while he could, and then proceeded to have the best statistical season ever. Even after his full-time career ended, Pearson would still continue to be a force in NASCAR for years. In 1974, he ran less than 2/3 of the season. That year would end up being Richard Petty's 5th title. Obviously, Petty and the other championship contenders all ran the full 30-race schedule. Petty had an incredible season, and comfortably walked away with another title. In his 19 races though, David Pearson completely showed up the king. Considering Petty's numbers here include the 11 races which Pearson did not run, these stats paint the picture of an absolute domination by the Silver Fox. If he had ran all 30 races, it appears quite likely that he would have taken the crown that season. The 2 craziest stats from this season to me are his average start and his top 5 percentage. Out of his 19 race attempts, he would have a mechanical failure take him out of 4. In the other 15, he finished top 5 every single time. Even more ridiculous, he had no 5th place finishes. 1 4th and 2 3rds. I want you to consider that. In the races where his car was running at the end, he finished in the top 2 12 out of 15 times. He was basically perfect. Possibly even crazier was his average start in 1974. Though he is not eligible due to not running the full schedule, Pearson had, in my view, the best qualifying season ever. His average start was an asinine 2.2. He only started outside of the top 3 times. It's hard to exaggerate the difficulty of this. For context, Richard Petty had an average start of 4 flat this year. Pearson almost halved the average start of the champion. And remember, this was all past the Pioneer era, when there were actually multiple competitive cars every single week. 1974 is a perfect embodiment of what Pearson's career was. When he raced, he was arguably better than the king himself, even holding an edge in the head-to-head 1-2 finishes. The trouble is, he just didn't race all that much. Having fewer than half the number of starts as Petty meant that he just never had a chance to accomplish all that he could. Even with that being said, Pearson has a clear case to be the GOAT of the sport. Not only are his raw numbers second only to Petty in terms of gravity, the mere fact that he beat Petty more often than not should pretty clearly indicate that he is in fact the better pick of the two. The same concerns about error, of course, are still present with Pearson as they were with Petty. All 3 of the Silver Fox's titles came in an era when there wasn't that much competition on a week-to-week basis. And unlike Petty, Pearson didn't have anywhere near the success in the modern era. Again though, this wasn't exactly his own doing. In the years where he did seriously run, such as 1974, he was a contender for race wins through and through. That is why the Silver Fox is NASCAR's greatest what-if, and maybe its greatest driver. David Pearson raced on his own terms. He came to the races he wanted to, took the pole, then took the trophy, left, and then refused to elaborate. Oh, and he picked up some empty cups along the way as well. We can speculate on if Richard Petty was right when he said that had Pearson ran the full schedule like his adversary, then it would be Pearson as the one with 200 race wins. Putting the speculation aside though, what's clear about Pearson's legacy is that when he did race, he was more likely than not to put on a show, and probably walk away with the win. And again, even if his numbers are only a measly second best ever, take the word of the guy in first. David Pearson is the greatest driver ever. If you prefer your GOAT to be a full-fledged member of the modern era, and if you think that a driver's peak is the best way of classifying their greatness, then the grittiest and toughest driver ever might just be the pick for you.
Cale Yarborough in third. Bounces off the wall. Yarborough's in the lead.
Cale Yarborough will win the Alabama 500. Cale Yarborough taking first. At the line it is Cale Yarborough. He's done it again. Back straightaway. Yarborough and Allison, they're at it again. The line.
Cale Yarborough takes the checkered flag, and Cale Yarborough has won.
He won the NASCAR Season-Long Championship last year, and now he wins the Daytona 500.
Cale Yarborough's nickname says it all. Old Hickory was a tough-as-nails driver who didn't have the suave and handsome demeanour of Pearson or the lovable charm of Petty. He made up for it with aggression, determination, and grit. Yarborough gave nothing to his competitors and expected nothing more in return. After bouncing between one-off rides and subpar teams for the better part of 15 years and playing third fiddle to the Pearson-Petty dichotomy, Cale Yarborough had the best 3-year stretch in the modern era. After pairing up with Junior Johnson, Old Hickory became undeniable. It wasn't just that he won 3 championships. It wasn't even that he won them consecutively from 1976 to 1978. The reason why I say this is the greatest peak in the history of the sport is because he didn't win these titles idly. Yarbrough and Junior Johnson combined to utterly annihilate their competition for 3 whole years. 76 was the start of the Yarbrough era, and clearly the weakest of the 3 seasons. The fact that a season where he led more than 40% of the laps he ran and won almost a third of the races is considered weak should tell you how extraordinary the next 2 were. Come 1977, Cale had a season which can adequately be described with a single stat. His average finish that year was 4.5. Not only is that completely godly, and not only was that a mystifying 3 positions better than second best, that is the far and away best mark in the entire modern era. The series leading amount of wins, top 5s, top 10s, and laps led were all well and good, but an average finish of 4.5 is almost difficult to picture. Imagine finishing top 5 in a race, and it actually bringing up your average finish. That's what we're dealing with here. Pure dominance. Capping his trilogy of titles, Cale's 78 season was less about consistency and more about sheer speed. His average finish dropped to a pedestrian 6 flat, a number which was still 3 spots better than anybody else. He saw vast improvement in other areas though. His average start of 3.6 was the catalyst for him taking another title, and his 3rd straight. That feat wouldn't be repeated for 3 decades. He wasn't just a 3-hit wonder though. Old Hickory's numbers may not look overly imposing when considered in a vacuum. However, when you remember that his prime coincided with the careers of 5 other candidates on this list, his stats arguably surpass even that of Pearson and Petty. Even more importantly, not only did his prime coincide with these greats of the sport, but he had the best 3-year stretch ever against the greatest concentration of top-level talent the sport had ever seen to that point, and maybe ever will. After a relatively down season in 1979, many thought Cale had started to regress and would finally come back down to earth. In his final full-time season though, Yarbrough demonstrated the grit that he was famous for. 1980 saw him get 14 poles in just 31 races. All of those combined to give him the best average start in history, 3.1. There are not powerful enough adverbs in the English language for me to describe that number, so I won't even try. 1980 became a missed opportunity for Cale to capture title number 4, falling just the equivalent of 4 race positions short. Alas, his career is nothing to frown upon. Some might say that he's the victim of the same issues as David Pearson. Yarbrough only raced full-time for 8 seasons, never really hitting his full potential. However, out of those 8, he finished top 2 in the points a whopping 6 times. Included in those 6 was the best 3-year stretch a driver has ever had. Maybe his all-time numbers aren't the most exceptional, and maybe it's true that he could only win a championship with the best team in the garage operating at the top of their game. No matter what though, if you define greatness as the best anyone ever got, Old Hickory's peak remains unmatched. If that is your criteria, it is hard to deny Cale Yarbrough the crown of GOAT. The most recognizable moment of Cale's career came during an event which he didn't even win. An era-defining brawl with the next candidate on our docket. It is the 1979 Daytona 500. For the first time ever, it is being nationally broadcast flag to flag. A historic snowstorm has meant that more than 16 million Americans are watching the race unfold. On the last lap, Cale Yarbrough is battling Donnie Allison for the race win. Little did those 16 million know, they are about to witness the most important event in NASCAR history.
The white flag is out, 1 lap to go. This is the last lap.
Stand by for a finish.
Two of the greatest fiddling here, fidgeting with first place, passing some of the stragglers in the last lap, trying to take it home. It's all come down to this. Out of turn two, Donnie Allison in first. Where will Cale make his move? He comes to the inside. Donnie Allison throws the line. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. They hit again. They climb into the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. They slide down to the inside. They're out of it. And there's a fight between Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison. The tempers overflowing. They're angry. They know they have lost. And what a bitter defeat. And Bobby Allison is stopped by his brother to help. There's Bobby Allison's car, number 15.
The two men who Old Hickory was fighting were from the same place, and they shared the same surname.
Takes the checkered flag.
Allison takes the lead. Yes, Bobby Allison wins the Western 500. It is Allison who perseveres and takes the checkered flag to win the Western 500.
Bobby Allison has won the Daytona 500.
No NASCAR driver in history could get more out of less than the leader of the Alabama gang. Bobby Allison was the founder of the most famous group of stock car drivers ever, and even more impressively, he was the clear best of the bunch. He ranks 4th all-time in wins, with those usually coming at the most important times. When he retired, Allison had won 13 crown jewels, more than any other driver to that point. While his one championship puts him at a disadvantage compared to our 3 aforementioned candidates, this wasn't for a lack of trying. He finished second a heartbreaking 5 times before he finally claimed the crown in 1983. 4 separate times, he finished within 2% of the champion's points totals, all the while usually being in relatively subpar machinery compared to his rivals. With a little more luck, and maybe some faster cars, his numbers could have been up there with Petty and Pearson. Take 1972 for example, the first year of NASCAR's modern era. Allison's season would be one for the ages, leading almost half the total laps and winning 10 times in the newly shortened schedule. He would eventually finish just 1.5% of the way behind Richard Petty. The staggering part of that result is that while Petty had the full might of the most successful team in the garage behind him, 72 would be the only year that Richard Howard's team would run every race. Bobby Allison was a master at getting the most out of any car that he was behind the wheel of. No matter who he was driving for, be it himself, a struggling independent, one of the powerhouse teams of the day, or a future legend, Allison always found his way to the front. He won double-digit races with 4 different manufacturers, and one with 11 different numbers on the door. Time and again, Bobby proved that success followed him, not the other way around. Allison's consistency can be explained through one fact about the man: he would persevere through everything. In the 70s and 80s, few were better at Talladega than Bobby Allison. Coming into the 1987 Crown Jewel race in his adopted home state of Alabama, Allison was not in serious running to claim a second title, but he would, as usual, be a threat to win at what was one of his best tracks. What transpired to Bobby Allison that day would go on to influence the sport forever.
The yellow car still in the picture, but Buddy Baker, who has a lot of sentiment among veteran observers, as one of the real threats.
Oh, we have a problem.
Allison is blowing the tire.
Bobby Allison with a horrible crash here on the front stretch. It has torn out a complete section of protective railings. He has torn out a whole large area of guardrail. There it is, protecting the crowd from the racetrack, and he came very, very close to going into the stands.
As a wise man once said, this event could have ended the sport for good. NASCAR's greatest tragedy was avoided by inches on that fateful day in Alabama. In response to the wreck, NASCAR implemented brand new restrictor plates on all cars at the high-speed tracks of Daytona and Talladega, resulting in a style of racing which could not be found anywhere else on the planet. While it wasn't exactly his doing, nor his fault, Bobby Allison will always be inextricably linked with the track and with the sport to which he almost gave his life on an afternoon in 1987. He wouldn't let that stop him though. Allison would win the first Daytona 500 with restrictor plates on the cars the next February. It would end up being his 85th and final career win. 2 months after his 50th birthday, Bobby Allison had not lost a step. He became the oldest Daytona 500 winner in history. More importantly to Bobby, his son, Davey, who won the race where his father was almost killed the previous year, would finish runner-up to his dad in the biggest race on the calendar. 1988 marks the only ever father-son 1-2 finish in the history of the 500. The euphoric moment the Allison family experienced in Victory Lane that day would turn out to be one of the most bittersweet images in the sport's history. The 13th race of the season at Pocono saw Bobby Allison experience one of the worst crashes any driver has ever gone through. After hitting the turn 2 wall on the first lap of the race, Allison was T-boned by a car going full speed directly into the driver's side door of his number 12. Both cars were completely destroyed, and Allison was rushed to a hospital where he was declared dead. Though medical staff at the hospital were miraculously able to save his life, Allison would never be the same again. He had broken bones, internal injuries, and debilitating head trauma. Needless to say, the crash ended his racing career. Tragically, despite recovering physically from the crash after months of rehabilitation, one thing never returned: the memory of the day when he and his son celebrated as equals together in Daytona. Allison could never again recall anything about that race. Within 6 years of that crash, both of Bobby's sons, as well as his best friend Neil Bonnet, would all die in tragic accidents. Through all of this heartbreaking tragedy, Bobby Allison persevered. He remained active in NASCAR long past his driving days, and lived to be 86 years old. Bobby Allison's legacy as the master of consistency and a pillar of persevering through it all will live on forever. Sure, his one championship is a clear hole in his case, but the mere fact that in all but one of his full-time seasons he finished top 10 in the points, all while driving for underfunded and unproven teams, is miraculous. In his full-time career, from age 28 to age 49, he averaged a final points position of 5. Whatever he was driving, Bobby Allison was going to be elite. If you think that a driver's ability to get the absolute most out of any car that they get behind the wheel of is the best indicator of greatness, then I present you the leader of the Alabama gang to be your pick for GOAT. Allison's greatest rival throughout his career is our next candidate, and this competitor's claim to the throne doesn't just come from what he did on the track, but primarily how he conducted himself off of it.
And Darrell Waltrip will be the winner.
It's Darrell Waltrip taking the checkered flag.
Darrell Waltrip wins again.
Darrell Waltrip is the leader of the race.
Darrell Waltrip is going to win here at Martinsville.
Darrell Waltrip wins the Busch 500.
After 17 years of effort, the Daytona 500 belongs to Franklin, Tennessee's Darrell Waltrip. He's done it.
It'll be Darrell Waltrip, the first man in history to win this event 4 times.
Darrell Waltrip was ahead of his time. Debuting in an era when NASCAR was seen as a small-scale sport reserved for Southerners and moonshiners, Waltrip came in with a personality bigger than any of his contemporaries. Outspoken and brash, he would be the talk of the track wherever he raced in his youth, and that only continued when he made his way into NASCAR's top division. Immediately upon going full-time, Waltrip would win races and score poles regularly. He didn't exactly do this in a conservative manner though. Apart from his brazen way of speaking, he wasn't short of run-ins with some of our aforementioned GOAT contenders. After one such run-in with Cale Yarborough in 1977, Waltrip would be christened with a nickname he would run with for the next 50 years, Jaws. They said he would chew up the cars around him and then run his mouth about it. Interestingly enough, it would be Yarborough who would be pivotal in making Waltrip the legend we know today. In the late 70s, Waltrip drove for the up-and-coming DieGuard Motorsports team. Competing against titans like Junior Johnson and Petty Enterprises, it's a wonder that DW could get the results he did. He got close multiple times, but just didn't have the poise of the veterans around him. He lost the 1979 championship to Richard Petty in heartbreaking fashion by just 11 points in the closest title fight ever. A lackluster follow-up year was bettered by one thing. Cale Yarborough was moving on from his time with Junior Johnson, and that meant the number 11 would have an opening. Darrell Waltrip would join the best team in the sport in 1981 and dominate. In 1981 and 1982, he would thump the rest of the field. Well, almost all of it at least. Remember those years when Bobby Allison got oh so close to winning his maiden championships? Well, the last two were thanks to Jaws. Not only were the drivers upset with Waltrip's success, the fans were none too pleased either. On some weekends, the loudest cheers would come not when a popular driver won, but when some misfortune befell Waltrip's 11. DW was the first real villain in NASCAR. For better or for worse, it got him in the headlines and made him the star attraction at every single race. After capturing a third title in 1985 and coming close to a fourth in the year after, Waltrip would depart Junior Johnson and climb behind the wheel of one of the most famous cars in history, the iconic Hendrick Motorsports number 17, otherwise known as the Tide Ride. It was in his years with HMS that DW's public image turned 180 degrees. He was no longer the young upstart who was pushing aside legends without paying his dues. No, Waltrip, now in his 40s, became the legend who fans reminisced on. This was most obvious in 1989, his final serious chance at a fourth championship. After 17 attempts, DW finally captured a Daytona 500, and the fan reaction was, for one of the first times in his career, mostly positive. This sentiment was heightened at that year's All-Star race, when, after Waltrip got wrecked by Rusty Wallace for the win, fans showered the younger driver in boos. Famously, when asked about the $200,000 prize that Wallace had won, Jaws simply retorted, "I hope he chokes on it." Though his title bid would be unsuccessful, an arguably much more meaningful award came his way in 1989. If you had told someone 10 years prior that Darrell Waltrip, the cocky youngin who ruffled feathers every week, would one day win the title of the most popular driver, they would not believe you for a second. But that is exactly what happened. After he proved that he could back up his words and outrun his mouth, all fans could do was respect him. Once you got to know the guy, you couldn't help but love him. Waltrip's latter years were spent driving in slow cars at the expense of his career numbers. Of the 10 GOAT candidates we will see, he has by far the worst average finish. The fact that his last 6 seasons saw him average a finish of 20th or worse each year didn't help this. Overall, while his stats don't jump off the page at you, and in fact look relatively tame compared to the likes of Yarborough and Allison, that isn't what made Darrell Waltrip a candidate for being the GOAT. Darrell had a unique combination of factors which made him the loudest personality in the sport's illustrious history, at a time when it desperately needed somebody to do the talking. His brash interviews and almost reckless driving style, paired with his unforgettable paint schemes and historic accomplishments, meant that every NASCAR fan either loved him or hated him. But one thing was for sure, they knew him. The legacy of the man they called Jaws was only solidified when he became part of the best broadcast booth in the sport's history, with Mike Joy and Larry McReynolds in the early 2000s.
Boogity, boogity, boogity! Let's go racing, boys!
Reagan comes on a car on his spot.
Reagan's got it! He's got it!
Front row racing at the end of victory lane at Talladega. Reagan first, Gilliland second. How about that?
Oh, yeah, baby, yeah! It's over. Cinderella Reign is going to win the
finish of the Daytona 500. Side by side, bouncing off each other. Unbelievable.
He's got him. Oh, I believe he's got him this time. Oh, he turned him.
No.
Oh, he turned him. No.
Checkered flag in the air. The 52nd Daytona 500 to Jamie McMurray.
Yes. Little Jamie, baby.
Half a mile
Here
to
he
go.
comes. Here he comes.
Who's going to get up?
Here he comes. Here he comes. He's got him this time.
It's going to be a drag race. Wow. They touch.
Craven got him. Craven got him.
And
Craven. All right. What a finish.
have you ever?
No, I've never.
First, he was a polarizing figure who brought flair and excitement to the track week in and week out. And now, his voice will eternally echo throughout time over some of the most memorable calls ever. No other driver in NASCAR history had a personality as big as Darrell Waltrip. And if you want your GOAT to talk trash, back it up, and then talk some more, then Jaws is the pick for you. Some of DW's last semi-competitive time was spent driving for a man who he had mentored 2 decades earlier. And some might say that the driving style Waltrip pioneered was immortalized by arguably the most famous driver NASCAR has ever seen.
And Earnhardt loses it, goes on the grass, comes back, and Earnhardt still got the lead. Incredible.
To the line comes Earnhardt to win it.
Dale Earnhardt has won the second Brickyard 400. Here's the checkered flag, and Dale Earnhardt wins the Southern 500 for 1990.
Dale Earnhardt will come out of turn 4 and take the checkered flag.
And for the first time in his NASCAR Winston Cup career, Dale Earnhardt wins on a road course. There's the checkered flag.
Dale Earnhardt is going to win the Pepsi 400.
Here comes Earnhardt. The Intimidator is scraped and beat on the right side, but he will not be denied. Mr. Restricted Place, Dale Earnhardt comes down and will take his 10th career victory at Talladega.
Apart from having the coolest nickname of all time, the Intimidator was actually a pretty good driver as well. I should clarify that when I say pretty good, I mean he has the best ever average finish in the modern era. He won a record number of championships, all in the sport's toughest point system, and he has some of the most dominant seasons in history. No one man has ever embodied the ideal of a NASCAR driver more than Dale Earnhardt. He was an ordinary man who was able to do extraordinary things. I won't go into great detail about his family's history and his youth, since there are those who have done so much better than I could ever hope to. However, his exploits once he got to NASCAR's top series have more than enough content to make a competitive GOAT case. The start of Earnhardt's career was about as perfect as it could have been. Dale is to date the only driver to ever win Rookie of the Year, and then immediately follow that up with a championship the year after. For the next half-decade after that landmark title though, he would bounce around from team to team, never really finding a home. Eventually though, everything clicked in 1986 for Dale and longtime friend Richard Childress. The number 3 would win 2 consecutive championships, with the 87 one being the second largest points gap ever found in the 40-year history of the Latford format. At this point, Dale's 3 titles tied him with the likes of Waltrip, Yarborough, and Pearson. Yet, if you asked most fans from back in the day what stuck in their mind about Earnhardt, it wouldn't be his championships or his race wins. Rather, they would recall the times when he had wrecked their favourite driver.
Darrell Waltrip's alongside of him.
There's the hook. Bang.
Oh, his man, Rusty Wallace, stands off of turn 4. Taps him. And the Round he goes.
Here's Earnhardt with his left wheels down on the grass. He gets into Richard Petty, turns Petty crossways.
Oh, and we have a spin. Bodine is in the fence.
Rod is inside of Dale Earnhardt as they go into turn number 1, and both of them spin.
Oh, touch and around Bodine goes. Into the wall hard with the back end.
Dale, Marlin is spinning, hitting the wall.
Earnhardt is right on his back bump. Oh, Labonte is sideways.
Greatness often manifests hatred. People hate to see somebody dominate a sport. The public opinion around Earnhardt was more than this though. Sure, people didn't like Waltrip because of his outspoken nature, and many yearned to see Petty lose once in a while, but neither of those cases was anything like this. The hate for Dale didn't come around due to some trivial reason. Fans seriously despised him because, by all appearances, he did not care about anybody else on the track, and he drove like it. The worst part of it all was that it worked. He won infuriatingly often, and in his mind, if it wasn't broken, then there was nothing to fix. 1988 would be the first full season where Dale would carry his brand new nickname, the Intimidator. When Earnhardt climbed into his Chevrolet, he was a whole different person entirely. If you saw that number 3 car behind you, you were going to either have to move or get moved. No other driver carried this kind of aura. The other big change for 88 would play right into that persona. His longtime sponsor, Wrangler Jeans, ended their support, which meant the number 3 would need some new colours, and a new logo on the hood. In came the most famous stock car of its generation. The black number 3 and the Intimidator would go on to come dangerously close to winning the next 2 Winston Cup championships, including a loss by just 12 points, equivalent to 3 positions in 1989. He would finish off his prime by capturing the 1990 and 91 titles, along with the 93 and 94 crowns. After tying Richard Petty for the most championships ever, there was one more goal for Dale in his career, a prize which had eluded him for almost 2 decades. The Daytona 500. Despite being the winningest driver in track history, Earnhardt had never once won the Super Bowl of stock car racing. Every time, there was one thing or another which caused him to fail. In 1990, he was leading on the last lap, until he inexplicably ran over a piece of metal and cut a tyre down. The next year, he would get past with just 4 laps to go before getting loose and spinning. In 1993, Earnhardt would lead more than half the laps, but get past on the last one and lose by just 16/100ths of a second. Dale would finish runner-up in back-to-back years in 95 and 96, coming excruciatingly close to winning. The same would be true in 97, as Dale, while running second in the closing stages, would go for a wild ride.
Back straight away. Big trouble. Earnhardt out. Up and over, number 3. And for the 19th time, Lady Luck deals a bad hand.
Displaying the heart of a champion, Earnhardt would jump out of the ambulance and drive his mangled wreck back to pit road. He had no chance of winning, and yet he would not quit. It struck many as almost a defiant signal to the racing gods. Daytona would not break Dale. It would not take his spirit, and it would not beat him. In 1998, Dale Earnhardt entered the 500 for the 20th time in his career. Daytona had thrown everything she had at the number 3, and still, he kept coming back.
2 laps to go. 3 makes in the 500, Chevy, Pontiac, Ford, that's how they run.
And there's trouble coming off of turn 2. Some cars get strangled. It might be this. Whoever gets back to the start-finish line, they'll get the white and the yellow together.
This could be the Daytona 500. Bobby Labonte goes to the outside.
Labonte up high. Earnhardt uses the lap car of Rick Bass as a pick. 20 years of trying, 20 years of frustration. Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500. Finally, the most anticipated moment in racing. Checkered flag. Dale Earnhardt finally is a champion of the Daytona 500. Look out on pit road. Every man on every crew has come out to the edge of pit lane to congratulate
The man who has dominated everything there is to win in this sport, except this race, until today. There goes the grass.
Yeah.
At this point, no matter how many times Earnhardt had wrecked your favourite driver, or had spun a leader to get around him, or had roughed up a car beside him purely out of boredom, every NASCAR fan celebrated. Dale got the monkey off his back and finally won the sport's biggest race, in what would become the most iconic scene in the history of the sport. Just like Waltrip before him, he went from being universally detested to adored by the fandom. Unlike his predecessor though, Earnhardt's image went back the other way again.
Is Terry Labonte. Dale Earnhardt is second.
Here goes Earnhardt. He's on the inside. He's got position. He's going for the lead.
On the corner number 4, Earnhardt will take the lead from Terry Labonte on lap 436.
Earnhardt goes in the corner, drifts up the hill, and Terry Labonte just drives it on the inside.
And Terry Labonte, the leader, is spinning, and Dale Earnhardt takes the lead. Less than 10 laps to go. The leader of the race, Terry Labonte, spins. 5 laps to go at Bristol Motor Speedway.
Terry Labonte on the inside of Martin. He goes by. And here comes Labonte by Gordon. He's moving.
Man on a mission. Man, oh man, look at Labonte go. And Labonte inside of Earnhardt. He taps him. Going into the third corner, he gets way down on the apron of the track, coming to the white flag. There's a leader change, and Labonte takes the lead. Oh, and Earnhardt spins him out. Dale Earnhardt takes the checkered flag.
It was almost as if he couldn't help himself. Dale would never fit the mold that others assigned him. He was going to be himself, and there was nothing anybody could do to change that. After his controversial Bristol win, Earnhardt would remain a divisive figure until a fateful day in Daytona. 3 years after he accomplished the greatest feat of his career, the Intimidator would tragically be killed on the last lap of the 2001 Daytona 500. An unfortunate truth as it may be, Dale's death is what solidified him as the greatest icon in the sport's history. This is true on 2 levels. For one, he is probably the most widely recognized NASCAR driver by the global population. Whether you know the name, the car, the history, the death, or the moustache, everybody in the Western world alive during Earnhardt's prime has some knowledge of him. On the second level, for diehard NASCAR fans, Earnhardt is the only one of the true greats who we never saw drop off. In his final full season in 2000, Dale finished second in the points and had an average finish of less than 10. While he was never truly a favourite for another championship since 1995, he was a threat to win any given race until his death. Hell, even on the day he died, he still finished ahead of 30 other drivers. As crude as it may sound, the absence of any fall-off undoubtedly contributed to the status Dale holds in NASCAR lore. Dale is a 7-time champion, has the best average finish of his era, and took down legends of the sport week in and week out. But that isn't why he's the GOAT. It is because he is an icon, more so than any driver before or after him. In life, he was polarizing, but in death, he became a unifying symbol of the sport's heart, grit, and indomitable spirit. If the meaning of GOAT to you is the person who best embodies their craft, and who is most associated with it, then look no further than the Intimidator. The only place where Earnhardt is seriously behind the pack in his career stats is with Crown Jewel wins. It's a fair question to ask. Why? Most of his prime was centered after the era of the 5 aforementioned GOAT candidates, so surely he should have been able to farm wins over nobodies. Well, unfortunately for Dale, he would be faced with a new breed of racer to challenge him. A new breed who may not have yet had the experience or racecraft of a veteran, but there was one thing they did have: raw speed.
Jeff Gordon, winner of the inaugural Brickyard 400.
Here comes Jeff Gordon to take the lead.
And the 11th win of 1998 goes to Jeff Gordon and the Rainbow Warriors.
Jeff Gordon wins the 1997 NASCAR Winston Cup Championship.
Jeff Gordon wins the Super 500. Career win number 85. Jeff Gordon third on NASCAR's all-time win list. Jeff Gordon takes the win at Talladega.
This win's going to punch his ticket to the championship four. Gordon wins at Martinsville. Jeff Gordon's going to win his third Daytona 500.
Jeff Gordon was a certifiable prodigy. Before he was even 10 years old, he was already winning racing championships. Gordon would find success in any form of motorsports that caught his eye. After finding his way into NASCAR, Gordon showed everyone just how fast he really was. After a decent rookie season, Gordon's sophomore campaign would be where he would put himself on the map. At just 23 years of age, Jeff Gordon would win 2 crown jewels in 1994. These included the longest race of the year in Charlotte at the Coke 600, and the inaugural Brickyard 400 at the storied Indianapolis Motor Speedway. In the latter of those two, Gordon would win in front of the biggest crowd that NASCAR has ever seen, a staggering 250,000. Then, in his third season in the Cup Series, the newly dubbed Wonder Boy would show the NASCAR world how accurate that moniker was. Gordon's 7 race wins and series high numbers in poles and laps led propelled him to be the only thing that could halt Dale Earnhardt taking his 8th Cup title. Beating the Intimidator at the height of his powers at less than 25 years old would prove to be just another day at the office for Gordon as he became the driver of the late 1990s. Many link NASCAR's boom period at this time to Wonder Boy. He was the first driver to be a household name who wasn't from the South. His clean-cut look and undeniable talent broke the mold of what people thought a NASCAR driver was, and led him to becoming a pop culture staple. From hosting Saturday Night Live, to being on the cover of GQ, and even making cameos in Hollywood and getting mentioned in songs, Gordon expanded the self-contained bubble of NASCAR to a national scale. He was the antithesis to Earnhardt in many ways, and their short, yet unforgettable rivalry is one of the most storied ever. Without Jeff Gordon, NASCAR wouldn't be where it is today. Despite narrowly losing the '96 title, Gordon would notch his first season with double-digit wins. Amazingly, he would do the same in the 2 following years, this time converting those successes into series championships. Most notably of all though is what Gordon did in 1998. Quite simply, his '98 campaign is the best season in the entire modern era. 13 wins in an era filled with parity like none before it was unbelievable. In a time when it seemed that basically any car could go out and win on a given weekend, Jeff Gordon stood out and crushed the dreams of every other driver week in and week out. An average finish of 5.7 is seriously hard to grasp, and is the best that anybody has ever gotten since Cale Yarborough's all-time peak. In a stretch from June through to October, Gordon had 17 consecutive top 5 finishes. His average finish from race 14 through to the end of the season was 2.15. And as I just said, these weren't the times of Petty or Pearson lapping the field 5 times and being the only competitive cars. The field around him had 7 past or future champions, and arguably the best non-champion ever, Mark Martin. If it weren't for Martin having the best year of his career at the same time as Gordon, the Wonder Boy may have legitimately won 20 races in '98. His speed that year was otherworldly. After a few down years on either side of the millennium, some wondered if Gordon had fallen off. He would prove all of these doubters wrong in 2001.
And here comes Jeff Gordon for his 53rd career Winston Cup win. Jeff Gordon comes off the fourth corner and gets his 54th career victory. Gordon to block, and Gordon to win. He holds off Ricky Rudd.
Jeff Gordon, the point leader, comes off the corner and becomes a three-time winner of the Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis. Jeff Gordon has done it again. But here comes the road course king, Jeff Gordon. Second win in a row, and he takes his 7th road course victory, winning here at Watkins Glen. Here he comes to the checkered flag. Gordon wins in Kansas City. There's the banner. It's official now. NASCAR Winston Cup Series champions for 2001. Jeff Gordon and the Hendrick Motorsports team.
The 2001 NASCAR Winston Cup champion, Jeff Gordon, his 4th.
Gordon had a season that almost rivaled his 1998 obliteration. He led a stunning amount of laps, more than doubling second place. The 24 car also led the series in wins, top 5s, top 10s, poles, average finish. You pick a stat, it's likely that Gordon was the leader this season. He did this all in a season where he was one of 10 past or future champions vying for the title. He was the fastest of them all. By the end of 2001, Jeff Gordon had won 4 championships in just 9 seasons. If you just counted his wins from those 9 years, he would still be 10th all time, entering what is usually a driver's prime, already heralded as one of the best drivers ever, gave Gordon a unique opportunity to cement himself as the greatest. Though, strangely, he would never get another title after his 2001 campaign. The reasoning for this is hard to pinpoint, but many point to a big change that occurred in 2004 as the reason for his apparent downturn in performance: the chase. When the new points format was implemented, Gordon seemingly just could not adapt to it. He still had pace every single year, and won multiple races for the rest of his prime, until his brutal crash at Las Vegas in 2008. But no matter what, he was just unable to get over the hump. If you used a full season points format for the rest of Gordon's career, assuming everything played out the same, he would be a 7-time champion, matching Petty and Earnhardt. Now admittedly, that methodology is vastly flawed, due to it not accounting for drivers obviously performing different in different point situations. But nonetheless, the scenario is insightful. It simply appeared that Gordon was made to excel in a full season format, and he never got the chance to do that again. Maybe the most glaring reason that Gordon never captured that elusive title number 5 was a teammate of his, who was also a candidate for being the GOAT. But rest assured, we will discuss him in due course. Regardless though, Gordon's championships aren't why he is a candidate for being the greatest ever. It is his raw speed. While it would be nice for him to be the all-time leader in Cup titles, he sits 3rd in wins, only behind Petty and Pearson. That means he is by far the leader in the modern era. And even when you expand your view to all of NASCAR history, he has a clear lead in crown jewel victories, holding the most of all time. Gordon simply had the pace that nobody else did. Even when considering those drivers who beat him in a given year, or halted him from winning 5+ championships, it's hard to say that any of them were actually faster on pure speed than Wonderboy. That's not to say that Gordon was robbed of any of these championships. He undoubtedly wasn't the best of all time in terms of racecraft, race management, adaptability, versatility, or any number of other things. Rather, it is to say that his win total is no fluke. Possibly the craziest stat that depicts Gordon's speed is this. In his career, he raced at 25 tracks. He was able to win at 24 of those. With the exception of Kentucky Speedway, which he only raced at 5 times, well past his prime, he had literally won at every track he possibly could have. And if you think that speed is best represented by qualifying, well, he is no slouch there either. Gordon holds the NASCAR record for 23 consecutive seasons with a pole position. From a time when he was barely old enough to drink, to when he was the oldest driver in the Cup Series, he had the speed to go out and start at the front of the pack. Simply put, if you told me that I had to pick a driver to win a random race at a random track, I would pick Jeff Gordon. Sometimes it is hard to look past speed. And in that regard, Jeff Gordon is the GOAT. Of all the titles which Gordon arguably missed out on during his career, his penultimate season in the Cup Series in 2014 hits harder than most. The driver who won that championship in reality is our next GOAT candidate.
Kevin Harvick puts on a clinic.
The checkered flag is in sight, and the California kid, Kevin Harvick, wins the 10th Brickyard 400.
When the pressure is on, it seems as though he rises above the competition. What a run and a race for Kevin Harvick.
The closer, Kevin Harvick, is going to make it happen in Michigan.
The Coca-Cola 600 goes to Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick from the pole to victory lane.
Win, and he's in to compete for a championship. Checkered flag in Phoenix for Kevin Harvick.
Of our 10 GOAT candidates, Kevin Harvick has the fewest wins, the fewest championships, and the second fewest crown jewel victories. By all appearances, there is nothing that he can really hold above anybody else around him to claim that he is the best of all time. The thing with Harvick though, is that the stats don't tell the whole story around him. The one thing which he was able to do better than anybody during his time was perform when it mattered most. In sports lingo, Harvick was clutch. Now, that term may be strange to hear in motor racing, and admittedly, that is somewhat true. Players like Michael Jordan, Joe Montana, and Joe Sarkic are famous for excelling in key moments in their sports. That's ultimately what being clutch boils down to, upping your level of play when it matters most, and rising to the pressure rather than folding under it. The difference is, of course, it isn't so easy to do this in motor racing. If your car is slow or damaged and you're running 17th, whether you win or not is not really up to you at that point. So you could argue that there really isn't any kind of clutch factor in racing. I disagree. While you generally can't go from 18th to 1st in one lap by sheer will, being clutch in motorsports means putting yourself in a position to succeed and then pouncing on that opportunity when it inevitably arises. There was no one better at doing this than the man aptly nicknamed the Closer. From the moment he entered the NASCAR Cup Series, Kevin Harvick had pressure thrust upon him to a level that no other driver ever had. As a 25-year-old rookie, he had to take over the most famous car ever from the sport's biggest icon. Immediately, Harvick had the legacy of a 7-time champion, and arguably the greatest driver ever imposed on him. In just his 3rd career race, Harvick would pay perfect homage to his predecessor, holding off a hard-charging Jeff Gordon and denying Wonderboy a win. Off the bat, he would cement himself as a legitimate force to be reckoned with. After finishing top 10 in the points, despite being a rookie, despite running both the Cup Series and the lower division Busch Series for the entire year, despite missing the first race of the year, it was clear to everybody, Kevin Harvick would not succumb to the pressure. This became clearer than ever when the pressure was as high as it could get. At the 2007 Daytona 500, Harvick hadn't made much noise all day. Coming to the white flag, he was back in 7th. No one gave him much of a shot to win.
White flag, 1 lap to go.
To the white, man. Coming to the white. Single foul behind him. 5,
Front
16,
4, single foul. Here they go. They got to go. They got to get Mark moving. They got to move him somehow. He gets back to that yellow line right around the bottom, all the way through turn 1 and 2.
Mark Martin is driving the race of his life, and there's nobody that's better at holding people off at Daytona.
And Kyle Busch lagged back a little bit. Is he going to get help? Is he going to come? He's looking.
Back behind you.
He almost squeezed Harvick into the wall, and here comes Harvick, the 29, with Matt Kenseth.
Oh, Mark got loose. Mark got loose.
And Harvick's getting a run off turn 4. It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line.
Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag. Harvick. Kevin Harvick wins the Daytona 500. Stormed up the outside. He had a full head of steam into turn 3. Look at this finish.
And it's a drag race to the line, and we've seen Harvick do that before.
Yes, we have. What was the margin of victory for Kevin Harvick? Unofficially 0.02 of a second.
In what is, to this day, arguably the greatest finish in the history of the 500, Harvick gained 6 spots in a single lap, and, in what was, at that point, the biggest win of his career, showed the world what clutch really meant. Unfortunately for Kevin, it would take him some time to add to his legacy. That Daytona excellence would be his only win of 2007, and thanks to some down seasons, his last win of the decade. Coming into 2010 though, is when Harvick's legacy would truly begin to give him a chance at being the best ever. His first win of the new decade would come in as dramatic fashion as you might expect from him at this point.
White flag this time.
Can Montoya and Hamlin do the 2x2 tango, or will Harvick shove McMurray to victory lane? White flag in the wind, 1 lap to go.
ECR engines at the front of the field working together and looking good.
The big question, both those guys, they have to be on fumes as far as fuel, the 1 and the 29.
I don't like it. I'm just a little bit nervous getting a big lead out here. You got to be careful, but with these guys 2x2 behind them, it might work.
Staying to the inside, the 2 leaders have no drafting help, but they are scooting away from the pack. 3 corners to go.
Now Harvick, he'll keep pushing him, and he'll get over here to the trioval, trying to make the slingshot on him.
As soon as he knows that he doesn't have to worry about that 3rd place car of Montoya, he probably will try to make a move, although I don't know if it'll do him any good or not.
Last chance through the trial.
Here he comes!
Here they come!
Harvick! It's Harvick!
He got him!
He timed it perfect!
He got him!
Where did he come from? Wins Talladega.
He timed it picture perfect.
Despite not winning that year's championship, he led the point standings for 21 of the first 26 weeks, and had the best average finish by 3 whole positions over second best that season. The most amazing part of that stat is that despite being the runaway winner in that regard, he only led the 12th most laps this season. He may not have been up front for the entire race, but you could be sure that he would turn it on when the finish was nearing. He followed up his regular season dominance with just 1 finish outside of the top 10 in the chase. His average finish in the last 10 races was the 3rd best mark in the history of that format. Unfortunately for Kevin, his campaign of consistency just couldn't stand up to the raw firepower of his competitors that year. 2010 would be the first of 4 seasons where Harvick had the most season-long points, but was unable to convert that into a series championship. Despite that loss, however, it was fairly clear to the garage that he wasn't going anywhere. 2011 would be the year when Kevin Harvick would earn the nickname that would define his career. He would pick up 3 wins in the season's first 12 races, in a manner befitting of someone henceforth dubbed the closer.
Harvick told me moments ago he expects to win today.
Better not take their eye off Kevin Harvick. He'll be the guy that slips up there near the end of this race.
Harvick's the best closer in the business. As they run side by side, Harvick is there. He makes it a 3-car battle. And Harvick takes 2nd. This is not over. 1 lap to go.
Harvick's going to have to make a big move right down here. He's got the momentum. He's got the momentum right there. Here he comes.
And here comes Harvick.
He's got him.
Got loose.
He's got him. That little push getting into 3. That little bump.
Harvick, Johnson switches lanes. Johnson can't get there. Harvick wins it. Kevin Harvick expected to be a factor here. Last week's winner. Harvick keeps charging forward. We're in the last 10% of the race. That's when he's at his best. And here comes the closer, Harvick on the inside of Montoya. He is up for 3rd. 20 laps to go. This is far from over. 2 laps ago, Kevin Harvick ran the fastest lap of anybody in this race.
Harvick can take the position going down into turn 3.
He is there within a car length of Dale Jr.'s back bumper. Harvick is there. He gets underneath, and Junior holds him off.
No, I don't think so. He's going to take him right here.
There it is.
Got him.
And here comes Kevin Harvick, the closer. Clinches the deal 2 weeks in a row.
We have got a wad here going on in the third. Three and four wide.
Kevin Harvick's going to break out of that group. Kevin Harvick will go into economy mode because they don't think they can make it.
They thought they were about 1.5 laps short. You see the 27, his teammate pushing him. Kevin Harvick, not out of fuel yet, but how's that for a way to conserve?
Dale Earnhardt Jr. out front.
Can he make it?
White flag. Next flag ends the race. What a topsy-turvy finish to the Coca-Cola 600.
And Dale Jr. is scooting away. Uh-oh, he's slowing, isn't he?
150,000 people on their feet.
Jr. is slowing, he's out of fuel. He's out of gas.
Harvick, the closer, wins it.
Once again, where did he come from?
Even with the excitement he delivered on a weekly basis, it appeared that Harvick, just like Gordon, could never crack the chase format. He would consistently be in with a shot to win, but just could never be number one. His clutchest moment ever would come when the format changed, and he was forced to change with it. 2014 was a season when Harvick would no longer be the most consistent driver in the garage. Instead, he took a page out of another book and started whooping the competition as much as he could. He led twice as many laps as he had in any season prior, and had more poles than the rest of his career combined. After a walk-off win in the penultimate week of the year to lock himself into the championship race, Harvick was just a lone win away from the title. On that fateful night in Miami, the closer delivered.
It's Kevin Harvick, and what he's done all year is lead a lot of laps and have a fast race car. What a run for Kevin Harvick through 1 and 2. He just drove all the way around Jeff Gordon and gone.
And Kevin Harvick has led 36 laps already.
So Harvick to third. He and Hamlin, the top two in the championship now. So it's Hamlin second on older tires. Harvick 12th with 4. 15 laps to go on the championship. Can Denny Hamlin hold on? Comes Harvick. Harvick to second.
That was Denny Hamlin's worst case scenario for Harvick to get through there.
There he goes. Harvick's going to run. That's wide. Harvick leads. He's going to do it. He's going to win the race and the NASCAR Sprint Cup Championship. California's Kevin Harvick does it.
It would be Harvick's sole Cup title through his career, despite having amazing, championship contending seasons for another 7 years. Where he averaged a finish of 9.5 until he was 46 years old, he could just never capture another crown. The biggest missed opportunity of this time span was 2020. That year, Kevin recorded the best average finish of this millennium, but had his run stifled thanks to bad luck and the elimination playoffs format. 2020, and pretty much the entire time after his championship win, saw a shift in what we expected of Harvick. He no longer needed to pull out last-second wins. Instead, he had the machinery, skill, and experience to dominate races from flag to flag. Now, instead of closing races by passing for the lead in the waning moments, he would close them by locking down the top spot and never letting it go. When you saw that 4 car at the front of the field late, you could be fairly sure he wasn't going to let anybody by. The closer is a moniker that lasted for most of Harvick's career, and it perfectly encapsulates why he is NASCAR's clutchest driver. Kevin Harvick may not have the most championships or wins of his competitors, but his ability to seize critical moments and perform under pressure makes him a standout figure in the sport's history, and a true closer in every sense of the word. If you think the GOAT should be who delivers when the lights are brightest, Kevin Harvick is your guy. It is a wonder that a driver as clutch as Harvick only ever won a single championship. There is a very good reason for this, however. His fiercest competition for much of his career just knew the system a little better. When it came to picking his spots and expertly navigating the metaphorical chess game, Kevin may have been a Kasparov-level mind. Unfortunately, he was playing Spock. If you follow NASCAR in any capacity on the internet, there is no doubt that you will constantly see discussion about the points formats, and how one driver or another is proof of why a particular format is unfair and should be changed. There is only one driver who can actually claim that he single-handedly caused alterations to the format due to his dominance.
Jimmy Johnson lows Hendrick Motorsports and Chevrolet win in Texas. A fourth win in a Brickyard 400 to Jimmy Johnson. They're 3 wide, 3 by 3 to the line. Johnson. Hendrick Motorsports 200 Sprint Cup victory belongs to Jimmy Johnson in the Southern 500. For the second time, the Daytona 500 goes to Jimmy Johnson. Drag race, Jimmy Johnson.
And Jimmy Johnson is the 2006 NASCAR Nextel Cup Series champion.
And here he comes, champion for the 6th time. It's Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson wins his 7th NASCAR Sprint Cup championship.
Put simply, Jimmy Johnson and his number 48 team cracked the code for how to win Cup championships in the 2000s. Johnson didn't enter the Cup Series as some kind of prodigy like Jeff Gordon, nor did he enter a car arguably more famous than the rest of the sport combined like Kevin Harvick. Rather, Jimmy had just one NASCAR National Series win in his entire career. This didn't hold him back though. Winning 3 races and finishing 5th in the points made for one of the greatest rookie seasons ever. He followed that up with 2 consecutive second-place points finishes in 2003 and 4 respectively. In the latter of those 2, Johnson put together an 8-win campaign that likely would have resulted in the title were it not for Kurt Busch's tyre falling off his car at the absolutely perfect time. Alas, Johnson had demonstrated that he would be a perennial title contender for years to come. Unlike Gordon and Harvick, he seemed to excel in the chase format, beating both of them in its first 2 years. It wouldn't be until 2006 though, when Jimmy became the gold standard in the sport. After winning his first Daytona 500, Johnson would be the points leader for all but 4 weeks of the regular season, and after a sluggish start in the chase, he would have a 5-week stretch where his average finish was 1.8, that effectively secured him the championship. "2007 was completely owned by Jeff Gordon. Reading his numbers in a vacuum, you could only assume that he handily walked away with the championship. He was the series leader in top 10s, finishing outside of the top 10 on just 6 occasions. His average finish was literally 3.5 spots better than the next best driver, and by the start of the chase, he had racked up a more than 300-point lead. He was the favourite without question. Unfortunately for Gordon though, his chase demons would return. Despite winning 2 races and having an average finish of 5.8 in the chase, his teammate would take the crown away from him.
The defending champ, Jimmy Johnson, is back on top.
Jimmy Johnson's at the top seed with his 6 wins and 5,060 points.
Our NASCAR run out of Johnson, running 6 right now.
They are tied now, dead even atop the standings. Troubles for Jimmy Johnson.
Looks like maybe a right rear flat on that car.
There was a hole in the right rear tire which caused him to pit under green on lap 190. That put him 2 laps down.
Gordon actually will be the chase leader.
Jimmy Johnson makes that pass, and he would, as of right now, be the chase points leader in the chase for the Nextel Cup. Jimmy Johnson reassumes the points lead.
Jimmy Johnson doing a great job right here, using that craft to his advantage. Here comes Gordon on the outside.
Jimmy Johnson second, Jeff Gordon takes the win. And he takes a 4-point lead over Jimmy Johnson.
And Jimmy Johnson has led much of the night.
Car leading the race, it may be out of fuel.
Got the 48 of Jimmy Johnson on pit road. Jeff Gordon wins again. And Jeff Gordon extends his points lead.
Now we got a new leader, Jimmy Johnson.
Another victory for Jimmy Johnson here in Martinsville.
Jeff Gordon now has a 53-point lead over Jimmy Johnson. As you see how well that Jimmy Johnson is running, and Jimmy Johnson will win it here at Atlanta.
Gordon with just a 9-point edge over Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson in the 48 car is a man on a mission. Jimmy Johnson has driven the wheels off his Chevy, and he will win at Texas Motor Speedway. Jeff Gordon now 30 points behind Jimmy Johnson. No one's going to accuse that guy of backing into a championship. Jimmy Johnson is on the charge. Jimmy Johnson is the winner for 4th consecutive race in a row. And Jeff Gordon now being shown 86 points behind. It is a 2-man race for the 1 title. Making a Johnson and Gordon together again. And the last driver to win back-to-back championships was Jeff Gordon in 97 and 98. And Jimmy Johnson becomes the champion for the 2nd year in a row.
For a 2nd straight season, Jimmy Johnson would become a driving god in the last month of the year. Amazingly, he would record 4 consecutive wins leading into the year's final race. Many almost felt that he was effectively not trying in the summer stretch at the end of the regular season, purely using it for testing purposes. Regardless, Johnson dominated the chase in a manner that would become the norm to clinch back-to-back series titles. 2008 would be more of the same. Johnson wouldn't lead the standings for a single week during the regular season, only to turn it on and crush all of his competition in the last 10 races. While it wasn't to the same extent as Gordon the year before, Carl Edwards had Johnson beat in most of the major statistical categories. Their problem was simple. Johnson seemed to be able to flip a switch whenever he wanted to, and become the best driver in the series. After 2009 and 10 played out in almost identical fashion, Johnson claimed sole ownership of the most consecutive championships in NASCAR history, and had even surpassed his teammate and car owner Jeff Gordon with 5 in his career. At this time, the NASCAR world was cognizant of what seemed to be a natural fact of life. It did not matter what kind of season Jimmy Johnson and the 48 team were having 3/4 of the way through the year. Every September, he would change into a completely different driver that would utterly destroy the rest of the field. And it wasn't as if this was some secret. Johnson's strategy wasn't that hard to comprehend. He and his team used the first 26 races as a primer, and then go full throttle in the final 10. Every other team was free to try this. Ultimately, this tactic was often imitated, but nobody could even hope to replicate it. Johnson dominated this time span like nobody else has before or since. 5 championships in a row is something that will never be topped. But when you're a GOAT candidate, you can't just stop at one record. Johnson would have one of his best career seasons in the chase's final year in 2013 to capture his 6th Cup title. After this, NASCAR introduced the playoffs, in a move that was heavily influenced by the 48's dominance. There is perhaps no better compliment in a sport than the sanctioning body acknowledging that you are simply too good and too dominant. Greats like Bob Gibson, Martin Brodeur, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar are all alike to Johnson. Their leagues had to change the rules to accommodate their dominance. Just like Johnson's compatriots in this though, the rule changes wouldn't stop him.
Of course, Jimmy Johnson going for that 7th championship, but has to go to the back of the field after modifications once the car was on pit road.
It took fewer than 50 laps for Jimmy Johnson to make his way from the back of the field all the way up inside the top 5.
Keep pointing out Jimmy Johnson, Jeff. You look at him back there in 10th, he just doesn't have the pace of the other championship 4th. Jimmy Johnson in the 48 back in the 6th position with 19 to go, trying everything possible to try to gain on these front two. You see right here, it's still fighting that loose condition. A big slide by the 48. I think the 48 of Jimmy Johnson needs to be thinking a caution. They must have a caution.
Caution will come out. A restart.
So now as they line up, Kyle Larson picked the outside. That put Carl Edwards on the inside. The guy that's done the best job all night long on restarts is Joey Logano, starting right behind Carl Edwards. Can Joey Logano lay back a little bit, get a run, get alongside the 19 as they enter turn 1?
Yeah, the 48, 6-time champion Jimmy Johnson. The car just hasn't agreed with him. Chad Knaus, you heard him before the pit stop. What do we need? Big adjustments on the 48.
10 to go. They come into the restart zone. Kyle Larson, the outside. Carl Edwards on the inside. Green flag back in the air. They're blocking. Good go down low. Carl Edwards into the wall. He got tagged by the 22. Big hits by the 19. Jimmy Johnson on the inside. We get ready for overtime. Jimmy Johnson out front. This time by. White flag in the air. One more time around for Miami. Jimmy Johnson has never won at Homestead Miami Speedway, but he's never been in a position where he's had to win for a championship. Jimmy Johnson through 3 and 4. Make room. Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt. There's another 7-time champ. Jimmy Johnson wins his 7th NASCAR Sprint Cup championship. We may never see anything like this in our lifetimes again.
Claiming a record-tying 7th championship in 2016, Johnson proved that no matter the system, he could win it all. There are 2 often brought up drawbacks with Johnson's case for GOAT that are worthwhile to consider. First, we have to talk about who is arguably the greatest crew chief in NASCAR history, and certainly of the modern era. Chad Knaus was the leader of the 48 team, and according to some, deserves more credit for the team's 7 championships than Johnson does. Undoubtedly, Jimmy's potential was unlocked by Chad, and it's hard to imagine their strategy of chase domination working as well without Knaus on top of the box. The thing is, it's not as if you can just bog a team's success down to one person. There is nothing to say that Knaus would have melded with another driver in the same way he did with Johnson. Championships are won as pairings and as teams, not by a single contributor. Every amazing driver has had an excellent crew chief in their careers. It's not about who lifted who up, because they lift each other up evenly. It's all a two-way street. It cannot be held against Jimmy that he had what is arguably the best crew chief driver pairing ever. Rather, it's a testament to his professionalism and ability to draw the most out of his situations. The second knock people often have against Johnson is the point system. It is no secret that if you tallied up all of his points over his career and pretended as if the chase and playoffs didn't exist, that he wouldn't be a 7-time champ. That is a ludicrous hypothetical to draw though. As we've discussed, Johnson did not race as if this were the case, which makes the scenario totally moot. He didn't give it his all in the regular season, and that's how he was able to win so much. Like it or not, that was the format. Everybody knew the rules they were playing under, but no one could capitalize at the same level as Jimmy could. This is not a knock against his GOAT case, it's one of the strongest points for it. And remember how we just said that Chad Knaus might be the GOAT on his own list? Well, I put to you that the greatest crew chief of his generation would probably have adjusted his strategy if the point system was different. It is just as likely that Johnson and Knaus still wind up with 7 titles, just in slightly different fashion with a chase not in place. They were just that damn good. If a GOAT to you is an athlete who is able to dominate a given system to the point where it has to be changed because of them, only for them to still come out on top, then your GOAT is Jimmy Johnson. Throughout Johnson's storied career, He had rivalries with the likes of Jeff Gordon, Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, Kurt Busch, and more. But arguably the driver who consistently gave him the most grief in his almost 20 years in the Cup Series was the brother of the last guy we just listed.
Kyle Busch completes the weekend sweep and wins in Martinsville. His fourth try at Darlington. His first checkered flag. Kyle Busch wins. Kyle Busch gets it done at Charlotte. Kyle Busch is going to add his name to the illustrious list of Brickyard 400 winners.
What a weekend. You're about to see history. The first man ever to sweep all three touring series.
Kyle Busch will get his 63rd career victory in the NASCAR Cup Series. No one has battled through as much pain and had as much perseverance as 30-year-old Kyle Busch. Tonight he earns his first Cup title. Kyle Busch, the 2015 NASCAR Sprint Cup champion.
When talking about Kyle Busch, there is one stat which completely separates him from every other driver, both on our list and in NASCAR history. Looking at our 4 key all-time metrics, it's clear that by traditional numbers, Busch doesn't really have a claim to be the GOAT. But his best metric comes with a variation to the numbers we've been using up until now. If you include races ran in the 2 lower series of NASCAR, Kyle Busch is far and away the all-time wins leader. Not only is Busch 9th on the all-time Cup Series leaderboard, he is by far in P1 in both the Xfinity and the Truck Series. Notably, in the former, he has more than double the wins of the next best driver. No equipment would stop Kyle Busch from getting to victory lane. He has shown an unparalleled ability to adapt and thrive in 4 different generations of cars in the Cup Series. Case in point, he was the first ever winner in NASCAR's Car of Tomorrow in 2007, despite being just 21 years old. Throughout his career, Kyle Busch has shown that he can win in literally anything. Busch's other records only further support his distinction as the most versatile driver in NASCAR's history. He holds the record for the most seasons in a row with a win, with 19. He also happens to be the only driver to ever pull off a sweep of an entire weekend at a track, winning a race in all 3 series. Oh, and he's done that twice. And it's not as if he was racking up wins in the lower series against scrubs either. In the bushwhacking years of the late 2000s, no relation to Kyle's surname, he would compete against future champions like Brad Keselowski, Kevin Harvick, and Joey Logano, along with all-time greats like Carl Edwards and Matt Kenseth almost every week. His all-time win total is no fluke. Even Richard Petty's son, also named Kyle, agrees that Busch's record number of wins is just as impressive as his father's record number of championships and cup wins. And don't let those records distract you from the fact that Kyle was no slouch in NASCAR's Premier Series either. Being 9th on the all-time Cup Series win chart may seem relatively disappointing compared to the guys around him. But consider the era. Kyle has the most Cup wins of anybody during his career, with the exception of Jimmie Johnson. Uniquely, Busch had his best career success in the playoff system. In fact, you could make the argument that in his prime, he could have equaled Johnson's 5 straight championships. Kyle made the Final 4 in every single year from 2015 to 2019, bookending that stretch with a pair of titles. If you only watched the start of 2015 though, you wouldn't think that any of what I just said was even remotely possible. The big harm of running so many races in NASCAR like Kyle did in his prime is that it just means there is so much more opportunity for things to go awry. Case in point was the 2015 season opener in the Xfinity Series.
They can't do this for 10 laps.
Eric Jones around. Back across the field. The big one, part 2 at Daytona. A horrific crash for Kyle Busch, who slid through the infield grass and went head-on into the inside wall.
I mean, he hit that wall head-on. It looked like he never even slowed down.
And he is climbing from that car, and that is an unbelievable sight.
Busch's devastating crash would break his leg and his foot, two things which are pretty important for driving race cars. He would go on the shelf for the next 4 months, and have an almost insurmountable hill to climb to even just make the playoffs. When he eventually returned, his first 4 races back yielded just a lone top 10 and an average finish of 25th. For all intents and purposes, Kyle Busch would pretty much have to try again next year. The issue was, nobody seemed to tell him that.
Kyle Busch is all over the rear bumper of Jimmie Johnson in that 48.
And here's where need to win overcomes wants to win right there. Kyle Busch to the lead. And off the final turn. No crutches necessary. Kyle Busch wins at Sonoma.
Hey, Kyle Busch, welcome back. 4 months away after those injuries in the season opener at Daytona, but he's right where he belongs, out front the NASCAR Xfinity Series.
Coming out of turn number 4. Kyle Busch is going to win at Kentucky. Second win of 2015 season for Kyle Busch. He is back. Kyle Busch will win at New Hampshire. 3 out of the last 4 races Kyle Busch has won. What a rebound he has made on his season. Kyle Busch closing the gap. Down the backstretch they go. He blocks.
Clayton
Here
misses
comes
mark.
Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch with an amazing pass down the backstretch. And Kyle Busch is going to win at Indianapolis. 12 drivers had done it before, winning the Brickyard 400. Kyle Busch adds his name to that list.
Kyle Busch swept Indianapolis last week, winning the Sprint Cup and Xfinity Series races. And now he is closing in on another victory in the Camping World Truck Series. It's Kyle Busch winning at Pocono.
Kyle Busch coming home second. He is in the top 30 in points. That means he is currently in the chase.
Coming off turn 4, Kyle Busch will win at Michigan. Kyle Busch is celebrating another win. Amazing story.
Here comes the 54 back on the inside. Kyle Busch is going to win at Bristol. Kenseth to the bottom of the track for the lead. They're side by side through 20 and 4. Kenseth in front, but now here comes Kyle Busch right back. Kyle Busch is going to win in Chicago.
And what a dramatic day at Kansas Speedway that sees Kyle Busch go to victory lane.
Kyle Busch is going to add to his win list. 8 wins at Phoenix.
Busch would win 4 out of the next 5 races, and after a string of consistent finishes after that, begin the playoffs as the number 1 seed. To put that into perspective, the week before the reset, he was 27th. He was doing all of this while still recovering from a broken leg, and just for the hell of it, also running consistent starts in the 2 lower series, winning 6 Xfinity races and half of his 4 truck starts. In the Cup playoffs, Kyle would run well, making the final 4. Though, having not won a Cup race since his dominant summer stretch, many had doubts if he could finish off the year with a championship. One more time in 2015, he would prove the doubters wrong.
4 wide, here comes Kyle Busch in the 18. Kyle Busch on the bottom, 2 championship contenders side by side. And now the 18 shooting for the lead to the bottom of the track. Kyle Busch out front in Miami. 3 wide for the lead. Here comes Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch missed the first 11 races of the season with a broken leg and a broken foot after an accident at Daytona. Kyle Kyle Busch, the 2015 NASCAR Sprint Cup champion.
Congratulations, you're the champion.
I hear you, man. This is so cool. Woo! Yeah!
He would follow up his first Cup championship with a pair of top 3 points finishes in the next 2 years, before having his best career season in 2018. Busch would rack up a series-leading 8 wins and have an average finish of just 8.3. Though he would come up short of winning a championship, the stage was set for a 2019 domination.
Kyle Busch coming through turn 4. He makes history today. The winningest driver in Truck Series history is Kyle Busch. And he's going to go back to back. Kyle Busch is going to do it in Las Vegas again.
Home sweet home. Career win 93 for Kyle Busch comes in Las Vegas. A little desert domination as driver 18 gets his 11th win at Phoenix.
And here comes the Candyman. 52nd career Cup victory for Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch in his Joe Gibbs Toyota is going to win his 53rd race in the Cup Series and hit his magic number 200 in Southern California.
And the checkers will wave for Kyle Busch. For the 4th consecutive race this season, Kyle Busch is the winner, victorious at Texas.
And as he comes off turn 4, he's going to get his 95th career win in the Xfinity Series. Kyle Busch does it at Texas.
54th career win for Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch ties Lee Petty for 10th on NASCAR's all-time list.
Kyle Busch through turn 4. Career win number 56 and his 8th at Charlotte.
Kyle Busch for Toyota and Joe Gibbs Racing wins the Pocono 400, his 55th career win, tying Rusty Wallace for 9th on NASCAR's all-time win list.
Kyle Busch is going to win again at the Brickyard.
He's the winningest driver of the decade, and now he is joining elite company. Kyle Busch is going to win his 2nd Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series championship.
In his last truly great season, Kyle would pick up a 2nd Cup title, and because it's Kyle Busch, also win 4 of his 7 Xfinity starts, with those 3 losses being comprised of 2 mechanical failures and a 2nd place where he led the most laps. In the Truck Series, Busch ran 5 races that year. His average finish? 1. He literally won every single truck race that he entered that year. And those weren't by chance. Kyle legitimately led almost 3/4 of the truck laps that he ran in 2019. If that season doesn't encapsulate Rowdy, then perhaps nothing else can. Oh, and speaking of that nickname, Rowdy isn't just the name of an energy drink that has lead in it. It is a moniker that perfectly captures Kyle Busch both on and off the track.
If you love you some Rowdy, let me hear you go, boo!
Kyle Busch driving number 18, M&M's Toyota Camry. Y'all ready for the Kyle Busch Show?
A lot of people hated it. You know, I guess those are the ones with 88s tattooed on their arm.
Unfortunately, you race with idiots, and, you know, I guess you'll have that sometimes. I should beat the shit out of them right now is what I should do.
I'm not surprised about anything. Congratulations.
Kyle Busch not happy at all. And Kyle Busch is going to turn over and bring the wall. A championship contender Hornaday in the wall.
Well, Kyle Busch should be parked for this race and maybe the rest of the season.
Somebody better keep me away from any human after this fucking race. I swear to God, I'm going to kill that fucker. All his fucking fault. I had this race won. It was won. Stop flipping me off and just fucking drive your shit, you little bitch. Yeah. Flip me off again, motherfucker. I'll dump your shit.
Oh, Kyle Busch turns Chase Elliott.
Here comes the 18. He puts the ball in the back of him. The 18 into the wall. The 42 sideways.
I don't know what y'all are whining about, but if you don't
like that kind of racing, don't even watch.
For most of his career, Kyle's brash personality, his weekly dominance, and the fact that he was the flagship driver for Toyota made him the most hated driver in the sport. As a wise man once said, people hate to see a winner. This may have some bearing on him rarely coming up in GOAT debates, despite the all-time legacy. The sentiment around him has shifted in recent years, after he went from dominator to underdog. Today, he sits as one of the most popular drivers in NASCAR. It's a fitting way for fans to remember a driver who, in all likelihood, they saw win more than anybody else. Regardless of what feelings fans had towards him in his prime, and no matter how or if those views have shifted since, you could never help but acknowledge his versatility and greatness. Rowdy is the GOAT candidate for those who are looking for a driver that isn't limited to any one style or generation of car, and can win races and championships in commanding fashion no matter the equipment. If that sounds like your criteria, I give you the most versatile driver in NASCAR history, Kyle Busch. And with that, our quest to detail the cases for who is the GOAT of NASCAR is concluded. The burden of choice now falls upon you. Who do you think is the true GOAT? Is it the one with the greatest raw numbers? Or perhaps his greatest rival who could have been better but never got a chance to? Maybe you side with the driver who peaked higher than anyone before. Or possibly an ability to wrangle every last bit of performance from one's machinery is what appeals to you. There is the choice of the driver with the greatest personality. Or the choice of the sport's biggest icon. Moving into the new millennium, there is the fastest driver ever. Or a driver who showed up when it mattered most like nobody else could. Perhaps you want a driver who single-handedly dominated the stretch of seasons so much that the system had to be changed because of him. If versatility and an ability to consistently perform in different equipment is your criteria, there is a candidate for you too. There are no wrong answers here, and I would love to hear what you have to say about this age-old debate. Leave in the comments who you think is the greatest driver in NASCAR's history and why. At the end of the day, the ability to discuss these things is what makes sports great, and having so many contenders for the GOAT of the sport is part of what makes NASCAR special.